This exercise is a hip decompression propulsion. So one of the things that very often happens to us is that as we, especially if we spend a lot of time sitting, we usually end up in a flexed hip position for a long period of time, and we lose some access to the extension. So flexion of the hip is this, extension of the hip is when you come back behind you, with your foot on the floor, it looks like that. So if you have had an injury that stops you from wanting to extend your hip, common problem for that would be an ankle sprain or a big toe injury, or maybe you've had some rib injuries or something like that, abdominal surgery, this can go on for a long time, that's stopping you from getting access to this hip extension. What you lose via that is you lose the ability to decompress your hip as you move. So when you walk, when you go into your leg, your hip should compress into the joint as the mass travels down into the leg. When you step out of that, if you get a good hip extension, you should get a decompression of the hip. And that pumping action is actually really important for the health of the joint. So a lot of people, when they're walking, they don't get access to hip extension. They've got a shorter stride and they lose their chance for hip extension. It's something that we want to encourage and we want to help you to create the space. It's also one of the reasons why many people have tight hip flexors and they don't ever seem to get over the tightness. The hip flexor is the muscle that elongates and controls the hip extension and therefore hip decompression. So if you're never getting the movement of the joints to decompress and extend your hip, you're never getting the chance to lengthen your hip flexor effectively. I'm not really a fan of the stretches against the wall, your knee down, trying to open your hip flexor up, simply because they fail to include the human foot. And that is the Rubik's Cube down on the bottom of your leg that spins movement potential up and down. So if we lose the access there, we lose the capability of getting it further up. So if we can get the foot right and get the extension of the hip right and feel our hip flexors loading, it's going to be a nice experience for our brain because again, every millimeter is a amount. We start to get 1 more millimeter of hip extension, it starts to free up some muscle load, some tissue tension. And that's exactly what we want here. So let's get started. I'm going to face sideways. I'm going to do it on my right leg. Take a step forward on my left. What I want to do here, I'm going to bend my back knee, and I'm going to make sure that I get the first, second, and third knuckles of my foot, my big toe, second and third knuckles, are pushing down. I'm making sure I find that contact first before I do anything else. So they're pushing down strongly into the floor. From here, I'm going to just straighten this knee. What that's done is it's gone from first, second, and third knuckle, straightening the knee has brought the fourth and fifth knuckles to the floor. So if I've done that well, I should have all 5 of my knuckles, my metatarsal heads, down on the floor. From here, I want to keep the knee straight during this, hands on my pelvis. A lot of people, when they bend their knee here, they might get a small bit of hip extension, but you can probably see that I'm a little tipped forward with my pelvis behind my ribs. I want to get my pelvis underneath my ribcage. If I do that without moving my leg, my hip will get extended. Hands go into the kind of small at the back, the sacral area. I just push gently my pelvis underneath my ribcage. That immediately gives me a sensation of stretching in where my pocket would be here in the front. So I've got a nice stretch there. Then I can bend the front knee and keep that pelvis underneath the ribcage. That's a lovely stretch through here. That's the start of me getting some decompression in my hip. To accentuate that and to bring that more on a further level, when we get to that position, we've got a nice stretch in the front of the hip. Hands on the chest, keeping the pelvis underneath the ribcage. I want to extend. And what that does is it brings the stretch from my pocket area here, my groin in the front of my hip, up into my belly. And it gives me a big hip flexor load. If I really want to go for this, take the same side hand, reach it up to the roof. And that gives me a lovely big hip flexor stretch. I'll just do that from the front on to show you. Again, my back knee is bent, I've got my first, second, and third knuckles on the floor, straighten my knee backwards, get my fourth and fifth down. Then I'm going to take my hands behind my back into my pelvis and bring my pelvis forwards underneath so that I get a stretch in this area. Then I'm going to lift my torso into extension, and then I'm going to take my same side hand and reach to the roof. So I've got pelvis tilt, hip extension, extension of the ribs or extension of the spine, and the side bend. And that gives me a lovely deep stretch all the way through here. You can also add a breath in. And we just move in and out of that pace, slowly at first, building our connection to this movement, to find the hip extension right, to get the extension of the spine, to reach. As you become better at this, you'll be able to just pop in, find your metatarsal heads, move forward and reach. And it's just a mobility exercise